So I just posted a video of the very first trip of 2024, and one of the most productive lures of the day was a lipless crankbait. And what I like about a lipless crankbait is how versatile the technique is. But when most guys think about fishing a lipless, or they hear someone saying they caught them on a lipless crankbait, they think they're fishing around grass, fishing that bait up in the column, ripping it out with a moderately aggressive approach. But what makes a lipless so effective is its ability to be versatile. You can fish this bait in so many different ways, and in today's video, I really want to break down the approach that I was using and the retrieve that I use in cold water to make fish bite a lipless. Now, if you guys watched that video, one thing you're going to see is that I was fishing the lipless pretty slow. And there were two main liplesses that I use when I'm fishing a lipless slowly along the bottom. The first one that you guys saw in that video was a Spro Uruku Shad Jr. Now, what makes this bait so effective is that it's a compact profile, but it still weighs 1/2 of an ounce. So when you want to get this bait low on the bottom, this bait is going to really fall quickly and stay down in the water column really effectively. You also get that really compact profile, so it's a really easy meal for these fish, even in cold water. Now, the other day we were faced with 39 to 42 degree water temps, so really, really cold water, and having that smaller profile was really important. The other bait that I threw was a Duo Realis Gfix 68, and the key with this bait, again, is a heavy compact profile. This is a smaller profile bait, but it is 3/4 or 5/8 of an ounce, so it falls very quickly. To me, this is more like a blade bait that has a rattle in it, and that is what draws these fish to the bait. Now, the key to our approach that day, though, was fishing this bait slowly along bottom. If you guys go back and watch that video, these fish were not very aggressive. They weren't eating our bait on the fall, and a lot of times when we catch these fish, you're going to hear us say, man, that fish didn't even feel like he was there. I didn't even know that fish bit. The way that we were fishing our lipless was with a very slow, methodical approach to pick apart isolated pieces of grass and cover along the bottom. One of the biggest keys, especially when that water is cold, is putting that bait in high percentage areas and triggering fish to bite. If you were to fish a lipless quickly through an area, you probably wouldn't get bites, especially when they're not aggressive in really cold water. But by fishing it slowly, methodically along bottom, you're going to be able to trigger fish to bite. Now, this is actually an approach that I learned a few years ago, probably in 2019, and has become a real staple in my arsenal in cold water. So the big key for me, especially when I'm picking apart these deeper water areas, is to find a compact profile bait that weighs a lot. So that Spro Uruku Shad Jr. or this Duo Realis Gfix 68 are two of my favorites, as well as a Lucky Craft LV500. They're all in that smaller profile with a really heavy weight. It's going to allow that bait to get down and stay down really effectively. The next key is to understand where to fish the bait. So what I'm targeting is isolated pieces of cover and structure along bottom that are going to hold heat, hold bait, and hold bass. So once you locate these areas, the next is the actual retrieve of the bait. And to me, this is the key point in the video. When you're fishing this bait, you're going to almost worm your lipless through cover. So what that means is you're going to make a cast past your target, past your isolated piece of cover that is on bottom, and then you're going to slowly work that bait with small hops and drags as if you were fishing a jig. Now, this is where the technique starts to get a little bit different than standard lipless cranking approaches. You're not going to be ripping it out of cover. You're not going to be turning the reel handle. You're going to be fishing your lipless bait like a jig along bottom with slow lifts and drags to just scoot that bait forward. One of the benefits of a lipless is the profile, is the treble hooks, is the vibration, and is that sound. Early season, these fish, especially up here in the north, are relatively dumb. The water is typically off-colored. If it's not off-colored, these fish are really lethargic, and you still need to draw them to your bait. So that sound, in my opinion, and the aggressive vibration that a lipless crankbait has is really critical in getting these fish to recognize your bait's there and come over and eat it. They may know that it's there, but to actually draw them to that bait, especially in cold water situations, having a bait that has those attributes is really, really important. So once you're fishing that bait along bottom with slow lifts and drags, and you come up to that piece of cover, this is where you're really going to need to be careful because you do have treble hooks. The one downside of a lipless crankbait is you have treble hooks, but when you get up to that piece of cover, you can either worm it over it if it's a piece of wood by slowly pulling it and dragging it over the piece of wood, or if your treble hooks get kind of partially hung in whatever you're fishing, you can pop that bait free. But one of my favorite places to fish this is around small, isolated grass patches. And because you have those treble hooks, when you get hung in that grass, you kind of want to hang your bait up. And you'll watch me do this a couple times in that video. You want to hang that bait up, and when it's hanging in the grass, give it a small pop, and it's going to cause those treble hooks to break free. That's when you're going to get a lot of those bites. Even though these fish aren't aggressive, there is still a reaction perspective or something reactionary about fishing a lipless crankbait that triggers these fish to bite. When that bait's hung in the grass, even though it's near the bottom, and you pop that bait free, it's going to trigger these fish to attack it. So it is a very slow, methodical approach, but by using that kind of hang in the grass and then pop that bait free, it's going to trigger those fish to bite. Now, especially in cold water, the rod's going to be a really critical component to your setup. And one of the things that I've realized over the past couple of seasons, kind of getting beat by other guys using this approach, is the ability to really feel your bait. For a long time, I've used a composite rod because that's what I've always thrown my lipless crankbait on. It's a great rod when you're reeling that bait quickly or you're snatching it out of grass really aggressively. When you're fishing that bait slow, you need as much feel as you can possibly get. So this year, I switched to a TFO Taction 7.3 medium, and it's a full graphite rod. Now, one of the big keys here is my ability to feel exactly what that bait is doing along the bottom. So you can feel that bait vibrate, you can feel it lift, and then when that bait does get hung and you pop it free, you have a little bit extra backbone to actually get that bait to snap out. With your composite rod, it's going to actually bend a little bit too deep in the blank, and a lot of times you're going to hang that bait and not be able to snap it free as much as you need to. So using a graphite rod with a little bit stiffer tip is going to be a key component of your lipless crankbait setup as we go into the season. Now, if you're fishing braided line, you may have to adjust your approach, but I am fishing 14-pound test fluorocarbon line, and it has a little bit extra stretch to that line, so I can get away with a 7.3 medium graphite rod. And then the reel that I'm throwing is a high-speed gear ratio 7-speed bait cast setup. 7-speed is really important because you need to be able to get that line and pick up that bait quickly when that fish bites. It's a slow approach, just like if you're jig fishing. Turn that reel quickly, pick up that line, and catch up with that fish that is coming to you. So that's my key setup, and that is my unique retrieve when I'm fishing a lipless crankbait slowly for cold water bass, is dragging this bait, using it with a worming technique to come through grass and cover along bottom and trigger lethargic bass to bite. A lot of people, when they hear me talk about fishing a lipless in the spring, they think I'm fishing it up in the column, always snatching it out of grass. But if you fish that bait slowly, methodically, you worm it through pieces of cover, and you soak that bait in areas just like you would a jig, you can trigger bites that other guys are missing this time of year. So hopefully me sharing this approach with you will give you something to think about and a new retrieve to try this spring. If you guys enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button down below, and go check out that video from my very first trip of 2024. Thank you guys so much for watching. Take care, Ted Lons. God bless. Pursue your passion.